thank you for joining us. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Manfred Steyer, and I live in Austria, and I also work in Germany, and I'm doing a lot of workshops and trainings and consultancy in the area of Angular. And I'm also part of the GTE program, which I'm very proud of. That means I have a more or less direct connection to the guys over there at Google. And I'm also writing, my last book has been published at O'Reilly, and it is of course about Angular.
Cool. And you're going to be giving a workshop on step-by-step improving startup performance with lazy loading in Angular?
Yeah, it's a session, and I'm talking about lazy loading in Angular. I'm also talking about the issues that arise when you are using lazy loading together, for instance, with shared modules.
When should a team start thinking about lazy loading in their Angular applications?
Well, I think they should almost ever use it, because it isn't hard to use and it allows you to speed up your startup performance. So perhaps they can leave it away when they are doing very small applications. For instance, applications with just one or two modules and just a bunch of components. But when they are going with big applications, in general, it is a good idea to go with lazy loading.
And what are some of the challenges of using lazy loading in Angular?
I think there are two challenges. The first challenge is that lazy loading is just about postponing work. So lazy loading means you are not loading some parts of the application now, but later. And we all know postponing work doesn't mean that the work is going away. You just have to do it some point later in time. And so lazy loading can cause a delay during the execution of the application, when the application thinks that it needs to load the module in question. Then of course this takes some seconds. This is a first issue. You can quite easily solve this issue by using preloading. Preloading means that first of all the application is loaded and the user sees the first page of the application, and after the first page of the application is shown, the application starts with preloading all the modules it would load by the means of lazy loading otherwise. So until the user knows where he or she wants to click, the module is loaded and is available immediately. This is the first issue that arises when you are going with lazy loading. The second issue is more severe. The second issue is that lazy loaded module has its own dependency injection scope. That means that when you are accessing a global service, then you are getting your own copy of this global service. And that is quite a pity, because in this case you have two versions of a singleton service. And if you ask me, two versions of a singleton service is one version too much. So you have to get rid of this second version, because otherwise your application can really behave in a strange way. So let me give you a simple example for this. Let's say you have a service you are using for authentication, and this service knows that you have been authenticated. And let's say the lazy loaded module is asking this service whether the user is authenticated or not. When the lazy loaded module gets its own copy of this service doesn't know whether the user is authenticated or not, because the authentication happens with the other version of the singleton service. So the application might not behave in a way you would expect, and that is quite a pity. It is especially a problem when you have to track down this issue, when you have to track down this bug. And because of this, you have to use one of two patterns that are available to make sure that you are just go with one and only one version of your singleton authentication service or of your singleton service that does other things for you.
And how do you do that? How do you make sure that you only have one service?
So the first approach is quite easy. It is even mentioned in the documentation of Angular. The first approach is about a core module. You would introduce an own core module that just hosts all your global services. And this core module is only imported into your app module, into your root module. And by doing this, you guarantee that those services that have been registered with the core module are available globally for all the other models that have been loaded lazily, but also modules that have been loaded traditionally when the application starts. This is the first solution. The second solution is something you might know from the router. The router has this for root method, and this for root method is just intended for the root module. And the router also has a for child method, and this for child method creates the router module for all other modules, for all feature modules and shared modules. And this is a pattern you can easily apply to your own modules. In this case, you are providing your own modules in two flavors. One flavor comes with services and is intended for the root module, and the second flavor comes without services and is intended for the other module. So by using this pattern, you're making sure that your services are just instantiated once and registered with the root module.
Is there a way that you think is preferable, or do they both have just different trade-offs?
I personally prefer the second approach because it prevents you from ending up with a huge core module, and it doesn't break up coupling. You can put everything into your module, for instance, into your shared authentication module or into your shared logging module, and then you just have to provide two flavors of your module. So you don't need to split your module up in one part that comes into the core module and in one part that stays in your shared module.
How do you test the lazy loading modules?
Lazy loading is mainly done by the router nowadays. Of course, there are lower level APIs that allow you to do lazy loading by yourself, but that doesn't come in handy. So in general, you would use lazy loading together with the router. And because of this, doing automated tests is very easy. You can just spin up a unit test that is using the router and that is checking whether the router is able to route to a module that is lazily loaded. Of course, you can also do integration tests to find out whether some specific routes are triggering the lazy loading mechanism and causes the application to lazy load some module in question.
Got it. Are there any rules for writing apps that can be lazy loaded?
I think one rule is to split up your application into several modules, because the module is the unit for lazy loading nowadays. Perhaps this will change in the course of the next months or years, but nowadays the unit for lazy loading is the module. And this is especially true when you are using this nifty API the router provides. So this is a good idea, but I think it is in general a good idea to split your application into several modules, because the module is a unit that makes your application reusable and more understandable and testable.
Got it. So what would be an example of a module that would be appropriate for lazy loading split up?
Yeah, I think most of us go with an app module, which is the root module that is kicked on when the application is started, and then we have several feature modules. And when it comes to a typical business application, a feature module takes care about one use case. And such a feature module is, in my opinion, a good unit to be lazily loaded. Perhaps you are splitting up your feature module into several other feature modules. This is especially a good idea when this one feature module gets too big. I think a general rule of thumb is that when the feature module has more than, let's say, 7 plus minus 2 entries, then it should be splitted up. And in this case, this bigger feature module can, of course, trigger lazy loading for other sub-feature modules.
And so I guess something like an accounts page, like accounts section of the, if you have like a my accounts, like that could be, or profile page, like that could be, the profile section could be a module. Does that make sense as a way of thinking about, like, or for example, dashboard could be one module. Like if you add some way, like invoices section could be another module.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's a good example. I think in general, when it comes to business application, it is good to think in use cases, and such a dashboard can be one of those use cases.
Okay. And how difficult is it to add lazy load into an existing application?
It isn't that difficult when you have already models, and as mentioned, having models is anyway a good practice or a best practice when it comes to Angular. So you just have to configure your router to make it to load a module it points to you just have to configure your router that it loads your model in question by lazy loading.
Got it. Okay. Thank you very much. This has been very helpful. Thank you.
Welcome.
Hey there. Are you into reactive programming using JavaScript? Do you have to deal with asynchrony in your web app? Then join this instructor Ben Lesh to learn all of the ins and outs of RxJS in his hands-on workshop. Available online and in person, go to rxworkshop.com for more details and to book your spot today. Hey there. Do you use Angular? Do you like fun in the sun? And how do you feel about boats? If you're nodding yes, then come join us on ng-cruise to learn more about Angular while on a fabulous Caribbean cruise. Check out ng-cruise.com for speaker lineup, workshop details, and to book your spot today.